Get ready for chills and thrills at Hometown Haunts and Hops Horror Convention here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Join us for a spine-tingling day of horror-filled fun on October 28th at the Mayflower Brewing Company. Meet horror actor Matthew G. Taylor from Resident Evil and dive into a macabre world of cinema and literature. Sip on chilling brews, indulge in ghastly treats, and immerse yourself in a haunted atmosphere. Whether you're a horror buff or just seeking an unforgettable experience, Hometown Haunts and Hops has it all. Don't miss out on the eerie excitement. Secure your tickets now by heading on over to Inebri-art.com. Go to our events calendar, and in October you will find the link for Hometown Haunts and Hops, which is sponsored by HalloweenNewEngland.com. HalloweenNewEngland.com is the website for the truly Halloween obsessed, with the most extensive guides to New England haunted houses, ghost tours, classic horror film screenings, jack-o'-lantern festivals, haunted hayrides, and more. They've got all the thrills covered throughout September and October, with over 2,500 Halloween events on their events calendar and hundreds of local Halloween attractions. It's the only place you'll find everything from haunted history tours and costume contests to which haunts are open on Thursday nights. HalloweenNewEngland.com has your Halloween covered and is sponsoring Hometown Haunts and Hops this year. Welcome back, Inebri-art. This is Andy, as always. Today we are actually joined by a Canadian musician, and I'm going to get right into their names so I can try and keep it as fresh in my head as possible. Elisapie, did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I have trouble with Michael, so welcome to the show. First off,
Thank you, Nakomik. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I am unfamiliar with your music up until I was approached by your PR, so I was checking out some of it, and please, excuse me if I'm not getting it correct, but it seems like you are a traditional musician. You're Canadian, but you're Indigenous as well, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about it? I looked you up on Wikipedia, and is it Inuk?
Yes, I'm Inuk because
Inuk?
it's from, normally there's many terms of, not terms, but way of saying of different indigenous groups, of course, in Canada, of course, in the US, it's the same everywhere in the world. There are First Nations here, and then there's Inuit who are, my people. We're from the Arctic, treeless, a lot of us, most of it. We have no trees. We're indigenous group called Inuit. Back then we were called the Eskimos by non-indigenous people, non-Inuit, but we call ourselves Inuit. And when you are one person of the Inuit group, you can say you're Inuk. That's more sing.
Oh, okay.
Saying I'm Inuk, you're Inuk, we're Inuit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. That explains. And I hate to say it, the American education system is not awesome. So I think most Americans think of indigenous people as one group, and it's not. It's many, many groups.
Many groups, many languages, many territories also that are very unique. But of course, I think we have something in common a lot because we are first peoples of this huge territory that has been, we have such love for the territory because this is also, of course, when we think about our spirituality, the way we have paved our way in these lands. That's where we can really understand the the sense of belonging. We are tiny little beings in these huge lands that are so generous, since so long, millenniums. So, yeah, we are very vast, but we share a lot of things, and we have a lot of things in common.
Were you always interested in traditional music, or was it something, kind of as you got older? I know me personally, when I was a kid, I was more into, hard rock and heavy metal. And then as I got older, I kind of bonded with my parents into, Irish music because that's, their ancestry. But so was it always something that you were into, or did you kind of start
Mm.
your music journey in a different place?
It's funny, kind of like you, I was definitely into Metallica. I was into, well, before that, there was ABBA and there was Tiffany, but then Metallica came into my life. And then I had the privilege to be a host on our local regional radio station up north, where I had the access to many old vinyls, like indigenous artists that I love now that nobody's really heard of in the South except back home. So, and then Bob Dylan, Neil Young came. So that's when I really was like, okay, there's so much richness, so much beauty. And yeah, I even love Irish music. I love anything that has history, background, and that tells a story of the people living, in
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, but traditional, I wouldn't say I'm a traditional musician. I've always seen myself like my uncles back in the 60s, 70s. They were a rock and roll group,
Oh, okay.
so we've been very I think we tell stories. That's
Mm-hmm.
maybe something that we may link tradition in it, because we want to tell stories. We want to talk about the land. We want to talk about the connection to the land and the people. But I'd say I'm definitely a contemporary Inuk singer songwriter, very much in tune with anything that's folk music, because that's what I grew up listening to. But
Tiffany's
of
not
course,
folk music.
uh,
I said Tiffany's not folk music.
no, and that's why I said the later on folk music arrived, but definitely Tiffany and Debbie Gibson.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Very, I mean, anything that's pop music. I mean, of course, Guns N' Roses to Metallica was definitely, it went north, this music. And yeah, so I'd say the only thing that is maybe a bit more traditional in what I do is that Inuit women, two women, make up this sound that is very unique, very rhythmic, very, very special, called throat singing, katatjak. I guess you would think of Tuvan throat singing, Mongolian throat singing, but it's
Hmm.
pretty much the same thing. But we really make a rhythm that's really, really, really special. So that's also what I also love adding sometimes to my music, but and of course I sing and write in Inuktitut most of the time now, but I also sing in English, a little bit of French, but not often.
Oh, you speak. Maybe that's my mistake. And again, I apologize. I have that American mentality of, oh, it's not in English, it must be traditional, and
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
I
not
understand.
right, but it's some, I'm always fighting against my
I
upbringing, I
mean,
guess.
I mean, we should all be traditional. We all
Yeah.
come from traditions somehow. We, of course, we mix them up, but I think it's funny because here for so long, indigenous contemporary artists were considered in their own territory here in Canada or in Quebec. We were considered world music, and I'm like,
Hmm.
whoa, how come we become world music when we're not from over there, where we've been surviving and making music here, and music and art that is transforming and moving all the time. So I think sometimes it's yeah, it's just lack of education, like you say. And I think it's what's really important is to acknowledge that, and that's when we have really amazing conversation. So I love people when they just, like you said, where I'm lacking information. And I
Hmm.
think, yeah.
And it's so funny, like I've talked about it a ton of times on the show about how um I feel like we're close in age. If you listen to Tiffany and Debbie Gibson and whatnot, we were the generation of when you went into the music store, there was like five genres of music.
Mm,
And now it's like you can't even really pigeonhole things anymore like that. It's almost like you should be like, well, this is happy music and this is sad
yeah.
music, and this is music to get up and dance to, but just trying to like, and I think that's why everything there was, classic rock, or sorry, classic, rock, rap,
Yeah.
and then everything else was world music.
Yeah. It's funny, as much as we're branching out and defining all sorts of different styles. I think we're also very, there's a lot of melancholy. There's a lot of like, oh, I want to re-listen to the old rap music, or I want to listen to trip hop again. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna come back. It's like, I think we're always trying to narrow it somehow to what our memories were made of, because we're pretty much in the past. I think a lot of artists that are very much out there who are not afraid to move forward and create new sounds that are very avant-garde are pretty amazing. But most of the time, I think we're always trying to narrow it down a little bit to the past, because I think we all want a sense of, I don't know, belonging, or yeah.
Mm.
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, especially I feel like the last several years, since 2020, I've been, I feel like we're kind of all in need of that warm nostalgia feeling. And
Mm.
I hate to say it, like I found that in McDonald's for some stupid reason. Like I would pre-COVID, I would never have it, but then like during COVID and getting better now, but it was like too often. And it was, I think it's terrible. It doesn't taste good, but I think it was that
Yeah.
nostalgia feeling of like a better time. And
It's yeah.
it's tough.
It's true. I think it's a phenomenon, anything that is going to give you comfort, because it was pretty scary. It was pretty stressful, right? I remember I'm
Mm,
here with my three kids and my partner and everybody. The first week where it was locked down, first of all, I went and bought, I don't know how much chicken and milk, and I was like,
yeah.
the fridge was filled. And then all the first few days, people, I mean, my daughter was making these huge chocolate chip cookies. Everybody was making desserts. Like, we never do that. Like,
Yeah. And
everybody
baking
was just like,
bread and yeah.
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 Yeah, it is. We're special. I think human beings are all very pretty special. We need to study more human beings. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Now, is your whole family musical, or is it just kind of you? Or because I know my youngest is taken up, into the art fields, and so I was just wondering if it's something that translates to your family.
Mm, I have a very curious, very my daughter who's 17 loves, I mean, she spent the whole weekend at Osheaga. She loves music. She doesn't want to sing. She's not going to go into the arts for I mean, her dad is an actor. So we were pretty much like, well, she loves anything that's arts, but she's going on another direction for now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
My youngest one, I'd say he's our little artist. I think he sings well. He has good memory, but for now, yeah, he's 5 and he's really into anything that's drawing, telling
Nice.
stories. He has a very, I wouldn't say he's really into artistic talent in necessarily, but more his mind, the way it works is very I don't know, very curious. He thinks a lot and he likes to talk and describe things that are that I can very much relate to, when I was a
Hmm.
kid. So it's interesting to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was some of my favorite parts of my kids getting older and growing up was them kind of, I was always like, oh, I'm never gonna, tell them to be quiet or not listen to what they have to say, which leads to some very dull conversations about, God knows had way so many conversations about wrestling that I don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, but like to me, it was like, why silence them? Let them speak
Mm,
their mind.
mm,
Because it's
mm.
part of the growth process. And do you find that your music changed when you had kids?
Oh, as much as I think the question usually was, do you write songs for your children? I'm like, oh my God, really? I know.
That's my
I'm just
time.
yeah, I'm like, I just want to raise them, and it's already tough living with them and making sure they're okay, making sure they have all the needs um, there. But yeah, I think. Definitely, I'm a much I'm I'm more fierce. I feel stronger. I feel I can really stand up for myself. I think musically, maybe we may not hear how it has changed, but definitely they keep me grounded and they give me energy. I mean, yeah, I'm tired most of the time, but they give me another source. They give me another energy that is, growing older, sense of feeling like, oh my, I'm going to get old eventually because I see them growing up, and I'm like, well, this is the moment to just try to keep things going and to challenge myself maybe because children are like they're teachers. They are little tiny teachers, and they teach us to face, maybe certain fear that we may have had, and we don't have a choice but to face them. So in that sense, I think they've been such a huge inspiration. Maybe not musically. I mean, yeah, I have written a song for my daughter. I've written a song, but they definitely evoke something that I needed to maybe face about my childhood, because there are mirrors too, right? So it's
Hmm.
always interesting to see, like you said, to learn to listen to their feelings and not shut them off, because it's not because we were told to shut off our emotions or who we truly were that we have to do the same. We actually need to learn that we need to listen to them a little bit more. Yeah.
So where do you find inspiration when you're writing your music? You said you wrote a song for your daughter, but you don't necessarily write for your kids.
Mm.
Is it more emotional, biographical is the word I'm looking for.
Mm.
uh,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a hard time going to a place to go write about a story about somebody else, or it's very much intimate moment all the time for me. Where I find it, sometimes it's in a space where it's just really quiet, like at home, where I'm faced with myself. Yeah,
I was
it's
gonna say you have a
it's
5-year-old. How often is it quiet?
well, they're not there during the day, so
Yeah.
I'm alone all the time, and I actually love that. I have that space, but sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, the quiet and the stillness, because then I have to think about all my thoughts and what's going on, and also, facing who I am, and sometimes it can feel a bit empty, and I'm like, oh my God, this is really stressful. This is like, but that's really where I dig in, and I'm like, what's going on there? What's with you, Elisapie? So yeah, and then of course I mean, we have a lot of stories to tell. We have a lot of challenges that we've gone through as Indigenous people. Knowing that also people are finally maybe able to open their ears and want to hear the truth is such a amazing inspiration also, because I've been making music, writing songs, and performing since the last 20 years, but it's only, I'd say, in the last 5 6 years where I feel there's a whole level of people wanting to hear and not have such a um, an idea of who we are, that is like, people of the north, the igloos, the cold, the snow. This is pretty much how we were seen. Or people who suffer from alcoholism, or you know what I mean,
Yeah.
people in the streets. This is how we are viewed, and I'm like, okay, can you just try to understand where we're from, or the beauty that is existing from people like us. So it's amazing to be an artist right now as an indigenous artist, because we feel like we are given such a nice place. When people want to listen, they really are very respectful and very curious. So it's this is where I also find my inspiration, is knowing, okay, you want to hear? Well, let me tell you. And I always try to do that in a way that is poetic, that is truthful, not hurtful, but truthful. And I think there's a fine line between um, not judging, but giving an idea of, okay, you've done this to us, you've done that. This is
Mhm.
not where I want to go, because first of all, I think Inuit and most indigenous people really don't see themselves as victims. I think it's we're too proud. We've suffered way too much to be in the moment of, oh my God, this is what was done to us. But I think just telling our stories, and having friends who are non-indigenous is very nice too. Having a community, art community, like you have with your podcast. Well, these are places where it's really, we feel safe, and we feel like we can contribute. We just want to contribute, to conversations and to share. So that's really where I find my inspiration. But of course, the North is where I grew up, is where I still see, when I look out my window, even though I'm no longer in the North, I'm in Montreal. I look out my window, and I take my guitar, and I see my little cousin. I see my aunt. I see, yeah. So I kind of think about them when I write songs, the reflections that they must be having, and yeah.
I mean, I love all of that you just said, because it's just making me think there's a lot going down here in the States about basically how we should be explaining and teaching history to people, is kind of the
Hmm.
extent, because there's a push to be like, well, it's not all pretty and it's not all fantastic, and some of it makes the current people in power not look good, and but that's the truth, and then there's,
Yes. Hmm.
it's to me, I just don't understand not being honest and just accepting the fact that, hey, the past was not always a good time, and now is
That's
not
so
always a
nice.
good time, and it's just, yeah, I don't, um yeah, I honestly can say I don't know enough of about indigenous people in general, especially people in Canada. um they didn't teach us about, you know the indigenous people in our country, and I'm sure there's overlap in between indigenous people in the US and Canada, I'm sure, because we drew the white settlers drew the
Mhm,
lines, not the indigenous people.
mhm,
um yeah, it's got to be really difficult to, but I'm like, I'm seeing a lot of things come out where, people are trying to keep their native languages alive and stuff like that, and I think
mhm,
that's
mhm.
incredibly important.
that's where there's a lot of there's powerful moments there, I think. Yeah, because by saying my language is worth it, my language is important, um, education is so important, right? So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, um, but I think, I had a friend about 3, 4 years ago. We had a very intense moment where there was a death of this indigenous woman who was, who filmed herself because she was trying to ask for help from her family on Facebook Live. Joyce Ishakwan was her name, and she died in horrific ways under the care of two nurses who were obviously very racist and very, yeah, she died in such a sad moment, and it woke the whole Quebec, the whole Canada up because she she didn't try to record herself. She just tried to do Facebook Live so her family could go get her because she didn't feel safe, and she was hysteric because she was, she wasn't feeling well, and she had 5 children, and this shook the whole Quebec in a matter of a day. It changed like that, like with her death, and she became a symbol, very strong symbol of the systemic racism. It's really present, and
Mm-hmm.
so my friend, she, we spent a weekend, a few days after that, and she started crying, and she said, Elisapie, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that my parents didn't tell me nothing. I'm sorry my great uncle who had an indigenous friend who never really did anything to show, curiosity, and I was ignorant because I just didn't know where and who could tell me more about you guys while you guys live. I mean, there's many indigenous communities in each big city around. There's always an indigenous community. And I told her, you know what? Don't be sorry. I mean, it's good you're acknowledging it. But if there was an elder right now beside you, you know what she would do? She would let you cry and let you mourn because it's also your suffering, not just my suffering. It's a form of suffering to feel ignorant and to feel that weight. And I told her it's so important that you acknowledge that, and she's amazing now. She loves to learn Inuktitut. She's very, pro culture, inclusive. So it's beautiful to see that someone who is able to acknowledge such just a heaviness that she also had to carry because she never really wanted to acknowledge it because she was afraid she was going to be judged. And this is most of what people are feeling is like, oh shoot, I'm really ignorant. I don't know nothing, so it's better to not say anything. And that's what I always say, stop doing that because we're
Mm-hmm.
not even judging you. We're so open to, because we know that there's ignorance, there's, lack of education, that we know already. But what's important is that we feel like people can talk to us and not be silent, because this is where, I always say silent hurts, silent kills, silent, so we're all humans. We're not perfect. Even indigenous people, we don't necessarily know everything about the other indigenous groups, and that's,
And it's that fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to offend somebody. But I feel
oh my
like,
God, please,
yeah,
yeah.
but I feel like if you're genuinely asking in a polite way, I ask stupid questions all the time.
Oh, me too.
There's 300 and some odd episodes of this show where you can go back and hear me ask all sorts of stupid questions.
Yeah.
But it's because I generally want to know. I want to know the answer, and I want to, improve my knowledge base. We actually
Mhm.
we had an event down here in Plymouth, Mass, which is a hotbed of indigenous things going on, both
Mhm.
positive and negative. And we had an art fair, and there was a gentleman there who portrayed himself as an indigenous artist. And lo and behold, it turned out that he was a fraud. And the really bad timing on his part was he happened to be at our event at the same time there was an indigenous art fair. I think it was like a block and a half away, and it kind of, I shouldn't say boiled over. It got brought to my attention, and I was then put in the position. I'm like, I feel awful. Like it was not my intent. How do I stop this from happening? And the guy was, he was from, I want to say it was the Herring Pond Wampanoag, and it was one of the Wampanoag tribes around here, and I apologize if that's not the right one. But he was like, listen, man, he's like, I'm not mad at you. He's like, I'm just telling you, what he's doing was literally a federal crime, and these are the things you can do to prevent it from happening again. And I'm like, I don't want to sound stupid, but can I ask for a membership card? He's like, yeah, you can ask for papers. He's like, if they are actual tribal members, they will have paperwork and you should be asking for it. I'm like, oh, cool. I had zero idea. And it's just trying to be respectful and learn at the same time.
Mm, that's pretty crazy, right? It's just unfortunate. That's what's unfortunate is that people are really trying hard as indigenous people to have their place in the community, and then there's the situation like this where it's
Mm-hmm.
just bad reputation. And and I mean, it's okay. I think it's okay for people to be aware that there are people out there who really, 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 really need to find a sense of belonging and a sense of identity, and sometimes they have psychological issues. I mean, how can you not when you are trying to portray some sort of fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's troubling.
Yeah. Sorry, I took us down that not awesome path. But let's
Mm.
get back to your music. Are you gonna be are you touring? Are you in Montreal? Do you live in Montreal now, or is that part of like a tour?
Yes, I live in Montreal since, yeah, over 20 years now. I've
Oh,
been
nice.
making music. Yeah, I left home when I was about 22, and I've just been here. And I mean, of course, I visit home. Home
Yeah.
is the north, but salute. Um, I'm starting a tour mainly here first in Quebec because this is also my home. So many, many, many dates already for 2023 fall, mainly winter, spring, and then festivals again next year. But a few places in France, if ever you're in France. But US. I mean, we were supposed to have this really cool Philly, New York City before the pandemic. It was going to be our last spring tour after a few many dates, but it didn't happen. So I'm hoping we are gonna find ourselves in hopefully your area because it's there's so much to see, but it's the US is so big, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
I know we have some kind of event in LA sometime in the fall, but new dates will definitely be more in 2024, but Montreal dates are, I think we have just sold out today, three dates here in Montreal. But
Oh,
if
awesome.
ever you're here, come out. It's going to be an amazing show where the past year we've been filming up north whenever I would go up, images that we want to use for the show. Also, this is something new for me. I've always done more like traditional, um, you know, four-member band and then good lighting and everything, but I just wanted to go beyond that because this album, Inuk album, where I cover 10 songs that are, that tell stories of my childhood, that songs that really have a meaningful, yeah, that are very meaningful. I translated them into Inuktitut, so it becomes a very maybe my most personal album. It's funny to say, but it's like that, and they're filled with emotions, sometimes sadness, melancholy, but also beauty and guts, and but yeah, we want to highlight and really take people on a journey through the extra special show that we're putting together for this Montreal show and Quebec City show. Hopefully one day they'll be able to go to, I don't know, cultural centers where they can receive such a big, it's not a big production, but it's kind of heavy in a sense where we can't just go on a tour, a little tour bus with, with the crew and the lighting and the projections and everything. But yeah, I'm really excited for this one.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, it's got to
Mm.
be exciting to kind of go beyond that, I don't say small venue, but that kind of next step up where it's more of an actual production with.
Mm.
You mentioned that you were filming, and that made me remember that in your bio it lists you as you've worked in documentary movies, correct?
Yeah,
And that's
I've
like a
worked
whole
in.
nother like aspect. And if I Google searched you correctly, were you in a Pixar movie?
I was in a Pixar. Well, I was in a few movies. Why do I have a blank? Oh my goodness. I did one line
Oh,
in
okay.
the Pixar,
Hey,
in
that
the
counts.
Pixar. Oh my God, what was it called again?
Soul?
So
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
exactly. That was what, three during pandemic actually.
yeah.
I went and did one line in a Pixar movie. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, it was. I forget what I had said. Something to do with walrus.
One
It
more
was
line in a
fun.
Pixar movie than I've had.
It's funny. I was pretty happy because some friends were like, "Was that Elisapie's voice?" And I'm like, "What? You were able to?" I guess they're used to my voice, and they were like, "That's yeah, that
Yeah,
was fun."
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, is there so when you're working in film, is there a crossover between music and film? Like, do you try to incorporate your music into a film or?
I try to not force that because I find it's two identities that at one point it's nice to express yourself, but wanting to be everywhere in it, sometimes that's not what art is. Not because I sing that I need to have my music, but most of the time I like to, I'm very close to the musical side of me when I'm either producing or directing, but yeah, I think they're very much related. It's funny because this album, it's called Inuk, and it's cover songs. But I feel there's another movie that is a fiction that I have yet to write, but it's been sitting in my head for 20 years. So it's gonna literally could take me a day to write it in a sense where I see it everywhere I go. I see the images and the stories. But I would say it's almost related to these songs. So they're always. It's funny because when I write music or I write. Every creative thing becomes one instead of being multiple things. It's like it all happens in this creative moment. So yeah, I see both, but I find directing or in films, there's another side of me that is maybe a little bit more anthropologist side of me, or I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, psychologist or some sort of a human behavior observer that I am gets to come out, and it's because I don't have to be in front on stage and shining. Music does that. It fills that need, but in directing or documentaries, there's another side to me that's much more the thinker. The serious, maybe the more serious side of me. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love
Mm.
that, and you said you've had a movie idea in your mind for 20 years because
Mm.
I mean, I've had to create spreadsheets with just ideas for all sorts of creative projects just because I'm like, I can't hold them all in my head. So I have to put them on
Yeah,
something so I can go
yeah,
back and be like, oh, I have time to work on something. What is it going to
yeah.
be?
Yeah, I think it's okay to not let them out right away and just to let them sit sometimes.
Hmm.
It's funny because I have a friend, Leif Volbeck. He's a singer-songwriter from Montreal. I'm sure you know him and you would love him. Leif Volbeck once said to me, he says, I had a tendency to record everything, every good idea I had musically, and I was onto something, and I would record it then for the next day, and then I would listen to it, and I just felt like it wasn't going to necessarily it wasn't the right process. And he said, at one point, I started not recording and have an idea and play it, and the next day try to see if I remember
Hmm.
what it was like, how my hands, my head, my mouth, and the melody I was hearing is still there the next day. That's when you know you're up to something, when it's your body is remembering it. And I was like, oh, I love that, is to just trust that something meaningful will always come back. Maybe not the right tone, but definitely the body and the mind registers something. So I love that he said that one day, and I try to incorporate that when I'm not, feeling like I don't have the need to record everything.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes like I feel like you need the idea to kind of ferment, and like part of it might be ready, so you kind of like make notes and write that down, and then you're like, okay, now I'm on to the next part. Now I got to let that kind of like marinate and run through my brain in conjunction with, and so you kind of relate back to where you left off or whatever,
Mm,
and then
yeah.
kind of, but then in the same aspect, sometimes I think just an idea spilling out onto the page is just as good. It just
Yeah, it's true, because it's sometimes you need to write, you know, sometimes you just need to, yeah, just start, putting things a little bit more clear, and challenge yourself. And yeah, it's another muscle for sure.
yeah. Um, where can our listeners go to check out your new album or any of your music, I should say?
Yeah, new album out September 15. What's fun when you want to discover my music is to actually go see the videos that I have done, because it was really important for me to really bring people to the music, these songs that are very well known. We've had so far Heart of Glass by Blondie, Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper,
Wild
The
Horses, right?
Unforgiven, yeah, Wild
Yeah.
Horses just came out, and The Unforgiven by Metallica,
Nice.
and that came out in June. So all of these songs are accompanied by, of course, videos, because it's really important for me to also bring the visual aspect. So you can go on my YouTube, simply Elisapie YouTube, and you can go see the videos that are. And there's another one that will be out, our official one, in September when the album comes out. But definitely Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. You can go listen to all these songs and the new album, just under Elisapie. Yeah,
Awesome.
and hopefully will come out your way.
Yeah, we have a great performing arts center right
Yeah.
here in downtown Plymouth.
Oh,
It's called
I love that.
the
I
Spire
love
Center.
that.
It's in an old church,
Yeah.
and they're actually refurbishing the whole outside. They finally got money to refurbish the outside, but the seating inside is still like church pews, and they have stained glass windows behind.
Wow.
It's a beautiful place to see a show. It's one of
And
my
the
favorites.
sound, the
Yeah.
sound. I mean, I'm made to be singing in the church. It's funny to say, but I grew up, going to Anglican church every Sunday, and my parents were not necessarily super religious people, but this is where,
Hmm.
when Inuit were baptized, or when people Inuit were became Anglican churchgoers, which is really not so long ago. The music that comes from either gospel or hymn songs, I can't even describe it. The love I have, although I'm not a religious person, I
Hmm.
really have a strong connection. And they were all translated to Inuktitut, and it's just, they're so beautiful. This is where the melody becomes really important very early on in my life. So every time I go to a church, something resonates in me, and I would love to. I would love
Yeah,
to.
I mean,
So
if
you'll
you're
have,
if you're headed
Yeah.
down this way, let me know. I'll put you in touch with the
Yeah.
Spire. Yeah.
I'm going to make sure my manager doesn't forget your city,
Yeah.
but it's a small town. How many people live in your?
Oh, it's one of the largest towns in Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
Well,
Okay.
land wise,
Land-wise.
land wise. But we're about 40 minutes south of Boston. We have a
Oh,
huge
yeah.
tourist, because people are here to see the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but there's a huge like arts and music and food thing down. This is the place where people go on like Friday and Saturday night in the surrounding area when they want to go out. They
Mm,
come down here and they'll grab dinner
okay.
and drinks, and it can be very much a zoo for living down here, but I love it.
But very cultural community. I love that. So I
Yeah,
think that's where you find all sorts of people. So maybe we'll come out your way. But
yeah.
like my buddies here are in Montreal now, but the Bar Brothers, I think they're from your area. I'm not too sure. I think they're from Providence, actually.
Oh, that's not too far.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they're
I was
amazing.
down close to there yesterday, so yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll
But
speak to them and say, hey, the Bar Brothers, let's go. Let's go to your
yeah.
home. Yeah.
But thank you so much. I had a really great time talking with you. This is
Me too,
fantastic.
very much. Thanks for the conversation and the honesty and the curiosity. So I hope you'll enjoy the album.
Can you tell our listeners to tune in next week uh in
In
uh,
Inuktitut?
yeah, yes, please. I didn't want to try to pronounce it.
All right. Tu salarevusi pinasarosi ulartume ta tsuminga onika tortatinit.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just said, have a listen next week. We're going to chat away.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.